And it sounds, Elizabeth, like as you and Théun work closer and closer together, as male and female, the relationship was deepening in terms of the work that you were doing. Um, is that what's important that comes through the courses? It is about how the relationships between males and females. And can you say a bit more about what the courses were about?
Well, because of my first experience with him in working through those courses, when for the first time I had this experience that you must understand that from the age of 17 I'd gone into the world of males.
Right.
I'd become an accountancy article clerk. I was the only female at that stage. I was always in an office full of men. When auditing got far too exciting for me and I had to leave it, I went into the commercial world. And before I knew it, I was flying up the corporate ladder, even though I think I wanted to rather get married and have babies, but life was just saying that isn't the way it's going to work. So I was always surrounded by men.
Yes.
Bearing in mind, I was born into a family with where we were 6 girls.
Okay.
And 1 brother. And so we were all competing for my father's attention, so you can imagine where that went to.
Okay.
So I'm not too sure whether this was a conscious decision at the age of 17 to go into the world of men. I don't know, but that's where I found myself for the rest of my life, pretty much.
Right.
But if I was in the boardroom, for example, and I would come up with something that to the men was just so totally irrational, you know, so totally irrational. Many times I felt, I suppose, was really invalidated.
Yeah.
And of course I had to choose the most macho of all industries, which is the liquor industry. You can't get more macho than that.
Right.
So any female coming in with something irrational was a bit difficult for them to handle.
Okay.
So when I had that experience of Théun, when we were going through that course, and he was encouraging me to be what I would say irrational, it was like a first experience of that. And I wanted to know more about that. What was that all about?
Yeah.
What was he actually doing? Because if he was doing that, then why couldn't other males be doing it? And what was actually going on there?
Yeah.
And of course, the more we were exploring and the more questions came up for me, the more I was teaching, the more I needed to know, the more questions other people were, the more, and so it went on. But what was fantastic is that there were always answers.
Right.
There was always a practical approach to things. And I discovered that that whole process that we had been going through, which was just quite natural, was something called intelligent cooperation. Now I knew what those 2 words meant, but putting them together had not actually been my experience up until then.
Right.
It's like, I'm intelligent, you cooperate. And so Théun started to teach me about what males are, what females are. And of course, because my romantic relationships had been such a disaster up until then, my partner and I was also working with him. And so we were each learning, both at the same time, things that we'd never actually learned. We'd not learned them at school, I'd not learned them at university. I'd been to every course under the sun. I worked for a multinational corporation. We had overseas trainers coming to teach us every last flavour of the month you can imagine. But nowhere had we ever been taught what a male really is, or what a female really is, what our respective roles are, why relationships between males and females, romantic or otherwise, are in such a mess, why it seems to be the battle of the sexes, it seems to be males competing against females and vice versa. And Théun, my partner, and I were also competing against each other.
Right.
And there were many things in our relationship that weren't working. We didn't know why. We didn't know how to do anything about it. And of course, the more I started to teach these courses, the more this was what was coming through all the time. Until eventually, I'd say within about 8 or 9 months, I took one look at what we were doing with these 2 courses. And these were the 2 courses that I'd actually done myself and been trained on. That were now beginning to look so completely different that you could hardly even recognize them as the 2 courses I'd done, as we'd introduced more and more of the Toltec approach into them. I realized that if I just looked at it from a business point of view, I was being totally production-led. In other words, here we've got these 2 courses and we're going to push them.
Yes.
I wasn't really listening
Mm.
to what the needs were of the people coming to me,
Right.
which in business terms would be marketing-led.
Yes.
So being production-led, I've got these products and I'm going to sell them. And I'm going to do anything I can to sell them.
Mhm.
But what's that got to do with the needs of the customer?
Yes.
And of course, when that big penny dropped, people started to feel free to come forward and to start asking for more and more and more. And what they were asking for was, please, we need something on relationships.
Right.
The little bit that you give us in the courses isn't enough. My relationships with my work colleagues, my bosses, my subordinates, my children, my friends, my husband, my wife, whatever it is. In all walks of life, this is what people were just crying out for.
Mhm.
Please, how do we make our relationships work?
Yes.
And Théun, of course, was totally alert to the fact that we need to work with the needs of people. But of course, he knew that I needed to build up my own confidence.
Yes.
So he'd really just been guiding me the whole time. Each time I would come to him and say, this isn't working on the course anymore because this is what I'm learning. That it's not, we would then change it. And then one day he could say to me, look, okay, he says, now I can see you're really confident within yourself. You know, your self-belief has grown in leaps and bounds. We now need to relook at the courses
Mhm.
and to really go through them again. And with that, I said, but this is what people are asking for. And once again, I experienced something that I hadn't experienced before. I could go to somebody and I could say, in my trying to be of service to people, this is what they need. But instead of saying, but I can't give it to you, and I don't know where to point you into what direction, like I did after those first 2 courses,
Yes.
there was somebody who said, okay, I'll write a course for you.
Okay.
What? You mean you'll write a course in relationships? Yes, of course. And that's what he did. And so we ran that course. And it was absolutely brilliant. Really, I mean,
Mhm.
people just opened up to it because it's a simple, not simplistic, but a simple approach in terms of how to deal with the relationship with yourself, first and foremost, and then how that ripples out into your life,
Right.
and then how to have a relationship with anybody. And what I learned was that life is all about relationships.
Uh-huh.
That's what life is all about, it's relationships. Whether it's with your cupboard door in the morning, I tend to have an ongoing relationship with my electric toothbrush.
Uh-huh.
So everything is a system of relationships, and it's not just with people, it's with everything and anything. And I just watch people say, why didn't we get this before?
Mm.
If I'd known this before, maybe my marriage would have lasted.
Uh-huh.
If I'd had this before, I probably wouldn't get fired. You know, it was those, where's this been all our lives before?
Yes.
And then with that, they started to say, but I'm really having a problem with my teenagers. Haven't you got anything for teenagers? That was enough to send me running up Table Mountain, never to be seen again.
I'm sure.
I've been the worst kind of teenager.